Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you, Robert. Thank you, Amy, and thanks for all of you who are here. I'm very happy to be hopefully imparting some information that will be helpful to you as you plan your next step after this step. Just a little information about me so you know where I'm coming from. I have a bachelor's in psychology, then I got a master's in counseling for higher education. Then I did a certificate of advanced study in education administration. And I started out my career as the director of career planning and placement at a small college, Mount St. Mary College in Newburgh, New York. Then I went up and ran cooperative education and internships at the State University of New York at New Paltz. Then I headed out to Pennsylvania, worked at Susquehanna University as their director for a couple of years. Too rural for me, so I came back to the Hudson Valley and worked for 28 ensuing years at Marist College as their development director. Retired in June of 2017 and then picked up a nice retirement job working remotely and part-time as the alumni career counselor for Vassar College, and I've been doing that for 6 years now. Um, just as far as what we're going to do here today is I'm going to go through information on resumes and then I'll go through information on networking. I'm going to proceed kind of quickly through the resume information because my guess is that you probably have resumes done. But I'd like to point out some things that I think are important so that you can check your resume against those and see if I have them included. And then we'll head into networking. There's a little video we're going to watch. We're not going to break up into groups because I didn't think there was any reason to do that. And questions, if you could hold them to the end or put them in the chat, I would prefer that because sometimes you get a question and it blossoms into another question and then you spend 15 minutes on that question. So I want to be able to get through this agenda and then be happy to talk to any questions that you might have. Okay, so starting with resumes, and by the way, this is not a flashy PowerPoint presentation because I don't know how to do flashy PowerPoint presentations. So this is just to keep us all on the track through the content. Okay, so we're going to start with required sections. Obviously, a letterhead, which is the information that you put at the top of the page so that the employer knows basically your name and how to get in touch with you. These days, people are very concerned about privacy, so they are often leaving off address information. They will put name, they will put telephone, they will put email address, but they will completely, not indicate any address information, which is fine. It's becoming the norm. And however, if you want to indicate your location to a prospective employer, you certainly can. You can put your complete address on, you can put your city and your state, and that can be helpful often if you are applying for jobs in an area and you want the employer to know that you are from that area and you're not going to have them incur relocation expenses for you. Sometimes employers will say, well, is this person really going to move from Texas to Hoboken, New Jersey? So we don't put them in the finalist group. Okay. Also in the letterhead, it's good to have if you have a personal website, a professional website, that is, a personal professional website, and also if you have a profile on LinkedIn, very good to have those up in the letterhead section as well. I would suggest, however, that you have somebody review your LinkedIn profile, review your website to make sure that everything is copacetic there. And also make sure that your resume is uploaded. I know that on LinkedIn you put a lot of your information in there, but also upload the resume so that it's accessible to the employer if they should want to download it. Okay. Um, Eh, Okay, so that's the letterhead section. Moving on to education, you can either lead with the institution or you can lead with the degree, whichever you prefer. Um, And if you are, of course, you're going to indicate the name of your school. A lot of people don't put city and state in. I think that's important because not every employer knows where specific institutions are located. So I think that's important. Also, we're going to talk a little bit later about applicant tracking systems. I have gone to a bunch of workshops about these systems, and one of the things I carried away from it was it's best to say Bachelor of Arts in, okay? Not BA and then a separate, header for your major or Bachelor of Science or Master of Science, whatever your degree is. It's best to write it out, Master of Education in Counseling, Bachelor of Science in Psychology. Best to do that for the sake of these tracking systems. I don't know why, but that's apparently the best way to list it. If you have multiple degrees, you want to list them in reverse chronological order. And you really don't need the dates of attendance. What the most important thing is the month and year that you completed the degree. And if you have a study abroad experience, definitely list it. I come across a lot of people. It's always a question I ask. Did you study abroad? And a surprising number of people say, yes, why should I have that on my resume? Very important. International experiences are something that employers respect and appreciate, and also may be an important experience for you in terms of the work that's being done at that organization and the job that you're applying for. So that's important too. Um, as far as coursework is concerned, if you are about to graduate or you're considered what we can call a recent graduate, which is usually 2 to 3 years out from graduation, perfectly okay to identify coursework. Beyond that, not so important. However, the exception is if there was relevant if relevant experience that's relevant to the jobs that you're applying for was a feature of a particular course, then you want to list it. For example, if you're going into a research position and you had research attached to a course, then you want to list that course and provide a brief description of the research that you were involved in. If there was a field experience, if you're going into, let's say, an education environment, and you took an introductory education course and you had to go out and observe, or you actually had to tutor a student or plan a lesson, you would want to include that as well. Those are just two examples, but there are lots of examples that I could give you. As far as experience, you can either lead with the employer, okay, the name of the employer and then the city and state of the employer, or you can lead with your job title and then the name of the employer and the city and state. So either is correct. When you list your dates of employment, it's best to use a month year designation and not just a year. I see a lot of resumes where the length of the job will be expressed as 2019 to 2021. What the um uh, the assumption there can be made that you worked from January 1st of 2019 through December 30th, 2021 or 22. And often listing just the year is used by people to disguise a gap in their employment. I would prefer to see people be open about an employment gap and address it in the cover letter, then disguise it by not putting the month year format. So that's my recommendation. And then, of course, most of us these days, when we're describing the experience, we use bullets and make sure that they are, each phrase is starts with an active verb. And you want to minimize use of articles, the, it, etc., as much as possible. It makes your description sound a little stilted, but that is accepted as what I call resume speak. And generally, it can also, in some cases, save you from having to go on a second line just by eliminating those tiny words. And also no personal pronouns, okay? You don't want to have personal pronouns on a resume. They're just not supposed to be used. And there are ways to phrase, your phrase things so that you don't have to use a personal pronoun. Another point in terms of the experience section is you want to quantify as much as you possibly can. So if you raised money for the American Cancer Society, it's nice if you can indicate how much you raised. You raised $2,000 for American Cancer, not the American Society, just American Cancer Society, because you don't want to use the article. Or if you exceeded the goal in terms of fundraising. A lot of people have been wait staff, during their education or their younger lives. If you waited tables, you can quantify that. Perhaps you handled 8 tables during the dinner rush. Okay, that says a lot more about you and your ability to fly through the restaurant, keep everybody happy, than just, you waited on tables. Also, let's say in a certain position, maybe even a club or organization, you wrote an orientation manual, for freshman orientation. You helped with something like that. More powerful to say you prepared a 35-page orientation manual if you actually did. And those ways of quantifying will help you impress the reader. Um, Also, in terms of your experience category, um, if you have a couple of experiences that are related to your job target, okay? Maybe one was an internship, maybe one was a volunteer experience, and one was a paid job, okay? Let's say they're all three are psychology related. You can set up your first section as psychology experience, okay? So that you can cluster those three experiences in that section, and it will be the first item in your experience section. Much better to show the reader the things that they're most interested in seeing as early on the page as possible. And then you can put all the other stuff that you did as additional experience. Okay. Now, if you call that section work experience, then you're really limited to including only the jobs that you were paid for. However, if you use the word experience, experience can be paid, it can be unpaid, it can be credit bearing or non-credit bearing. So I prefer when people use the experience header. Okay. Okay, moving on to skills and languages. Um, when you're mentioning technology, be specific as possible. It's much better to say Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Outlook than say Microsoft Office Suite. And again, when we talk about applicant tracking systems, that one of the things that those systems look for is specific keywords. Okay. Also make sure that you're spelling these apps correctly. I see a lot of PowerPoint without the second P capitalized. I see a lot of Excel as a capital X and CEL. You really have to make sure that you're spelling those correctly. As far as languages, if you have any capability in a language, it's a good idea to include it. You can either categorize your proficiency level as basic or elementary, intermediate or advanced, or if you have taken a language proficiency test, you can use the terminology that they provide. There are a lot of different language proficiency tests that you can take. I think probably the most well-known is the federal government language proficiency test. But it is good to let the reader know, how much proficiency you have in languages. Okay, moving on to the optional sections. In terms of honors and awards, if you graduated cum laude or magna or summa cum laude, the correct way to write that is all lowercase and italics. Okay, that is the correct Latin way to spell those honors. Okay, some colleges and universities give their honors in that way. Others do not use the Latin designations, but they will use departmental honors or college honors. If you know you graduated with honors, but you're not exactly sure how your institution, names those honors, then you can give the registrar a call and I'm sure they'll be happy to let you know. Okay. If you are listing awards that you've received, put in the complete name of the award and then the date that you received it afterward in parentheses. Okay, that's important. You can list your GPA. General rule of thumb is if it's 3.5 or higher. Also, you can list an overall GPA, but you can also list a GPA in a major or a minor. My psychology GPA was much higher than my overall GPA, so I would want, employers to know that. But never, ever, ever, ever round off your GPA, even 1/1000th of a point. I have seen people lose job offers, have their job offers rescinded because the resume is indicated as 3.7 on the resume, and it's actually 3.68 on the transcript that they need to send to the organization. So don't don't risk that. Just never round that off. Activities you can include clubs, organizations, sports, especially if they are related to your job target. You can lead with the organization name, or if you had a title in that organization, if you were a president or a treasurer, etc., you can lead with the title and then the name of the organization. If you've got space on your page, it's a good idea to do like one bullet that describes the role that you played in that organization. Or if it's an obscure kind of organization that people may not generally know about, it's a good idea to give a brief description. Okay. Objectives are less popular than they used to be. You used to always have an objective on your resume, but now they're optional. It's still okay to use them. And I think it can particularly helpful, especially if you are moving from one field to another, and you can use your objective to say that you worked for X number of years in this career, but you are transitioning into a new career field. It's useful to communicate that. The summaries these days are the much more popular. And your summary, but you don't want to have any more than 5 phrases describing what is most important from your background that you want the employer to see. Okay. Um, Personal interests, I haven't seen personal interests on a resume for more than 7 years. It seems to have disappeared. If you want to include personal interests, I would include those if they are related to your job target. For example, if you're looking for another opportunity in food security, and you happen to be a devotee of vegetarian cooking and you've taken classes and you're a minor expert, I would include that. If you're going into a sports related field like sports marathon, for sports management, and you have been training for a half marathon, I would include that for obvious reasons. Okay. In terms of travel, I would only include personal travel if it was significant and related to the job target. If you perhaps want a job in a college study abroad department, then you would not only include your own study abroad experience, but you would mention personal travel because it goes toward supporting your goal. Okay. So moving on, Robert, can we go to the next screen?
Mhm.
Okay. Things to consider about resumes. I wouldn't use a template. It's easy in the short run, but difficult in the long run because it's very difficult to change them, to put in new margins, to add information, to add a section. I would take the time, to set up your own without a template because I think it's going to help in the long run. Tailoring your resume is becoming much more important now that applicant tracking systems are in use with most organizations. So you want to um, look at the advertisement for the job. You want to pick up on any relevant experience or keywords that you should include in your resume. Um, so, and but also don't go crazy about it. There's now something called resume keyword stuffing in the industry. We'll talk about that a little later when we get to the applicant tracking systems. You don't have to put every single keyword in your resume. Okay. You can also work with multiple resumes if you wish. If you're looking for different types of positions, it's perfectly acceptable to have more than one resume. As far as transmitting your resume, PDF files are the most popular because they don't get blown up on the other end. And you can either email your resume or upload to the employer application page. And a lot of times, yes, you're gonna fill out an application online. It's going to ask you all about your education, all about your work experience. You're going to fill all of that in, and then at the end, you're going to see upload your resume, and you say to yourself, "Well, why do you need me to upload my resume when I've just given you everything that's on it?" So, uh, but anyway, that's just the way employers do things these days. I would stay with one page on length unless you have exceptional experience or you have a CV. There is no restriction on page length for CVs, but they are most typically used in academic environments. Okay. I would say after 3 to 5 years of full-time experience, 2 pages might be legitimate. Also, nonprofit and federal employers are more tolerant of multi-page resumes in my experience. I would stick with conservative fonts. I like Times New Roman and Garamond, especially for applicant tracking systems because they don't yet know how to handle certain fonts. And those are the two recommended. I think Arial is also one of the ones that is recommended. Your references, don't list them on, they are not listed on American resumes. In resumes of other countries, you will see the references listed on the resume. In the United States, the etiquette is to set up a separate sheet with your references and send that along with the resume. Um, I would always write a cover letter unless the ad states resume only or no cover letters. I would not want to miss an opportunity to speak directly to the employer and have the employer see how I use language, and it gives you an opportunity to sell yourself. So, okay, so moving into applicant tracking systems. Robert, can you open that video for us so we can take a look? Applicant tracking systems do not recognize columns, dialog boxes, icons, and it's kind of sad because here we are, with all of this capability to make our resumes look just fabulous with all of these enhancements. And, I think 95% of large companies, and I think it was something like 89% of small to mid-size employers are now using applicant tracking systems. So you want a plain text resume. You also don't want to try to game the system. There are tricks people are coming up with to try to get past ATSs, including what they call keyword stuffing or hiding. As keyword stuffing is just putting so many keywords in that, it's just not effective. And also hiding keywords, which Robert and I were talking about in white font to rank higher. But many applicant tracking systems end up translating your uploaded resume into a plain text file for recruiters who are then going to see these unnecessary additions. Okay, so are we on the networking screen yet, Robert? Yeah,
Yes.
okay, good. All right. Networking is the action or process of interacting with others to exchange information and develop professional or social contacts. Notice it does not say networking is to find a job. Um, Networking can help you find a job, but that's not the ultimate purpose. And I like to encourage people to think about networking as an ongoing experience, as an opportunity for you to develop and establish and manage a supportive group of individuals that you can turn to throughout your career. And 1 week before you need a job is not the time to network. Yes, you can do that, but I think it's much better to take a longer view and develop the perspective that all of us need a network. at some point in our life. We might be facing a challenge in our field. Something new has come down the pike that nobody expected. How do we deal with it? It's manager, it might be good to have others to be able to talk about that with you. Perhaps they have faced similar situations and can give you some helpful advice. You might need an opinion on an action you're going to take or a decision you're going to make. And you know, sometimes it's difficult or inappropriate to talk about people and talk about people who are in your own organization for these kinds of matters. It's good to have some objective folks who are not associated with the place that you work to chat with. And it can also help you if you're looking for work. You can turn to folks in your network. And also, there may be a really superlative mentor in your network who can really stick with you through the course of your career and help you along the way. Um, Before you do any job hunting, it's a good idea to clarify your job target. Any large decision, you know, you should say to yourself, who am I at this point in time? And in the career world, we think people should think about their career-related interests at this point in time. What do I like doing? What do I not like doing? What is my skill base at this point? Because 2 or even 1 year ago, you may not have the skills that you have today. What are my work-related values? What's important to me? You know, though values can change over time. I've worked with loads of alumni who have been in corporate careers for 20, 30 years. And when I talk to them, they're at the point where they say, you know, I'm just tired of the value system. I want to do something that's more important in the world. I want to give back to the world. So there's often a major career shift in the lives of people. Not always, but a lot of the time. And also, what's my personality like, you know, and how does my personality impact my choice of work? Your academic institutions, Robert and I were also talking about this. I would venture to say 95% of the colleges and universities in this country now offer career services to their alumni population free of charge. And most of them will have these kinds of assessment tools available for your use. So I would turn back to them. There's also a very good book that will help you do this called What Color is My Parachute? Initially written by Richard Bowles, who has passed away, but his name is still associated with the book if you want to pick that up. Also, you should perfect your elevator pitch, which is your 30-second verbal description of what you want and what your employable skills are. Okay, if you don't know what to include in that, just Google elevator pitch. There are a lot of good resources out there that can help you develop that. Um, okay, where do you start networking? Well, it's helpful to begin with people in your own personal network. Friends, family, friends of family, family of friends, neighbors, because they're safe, because they're known, and it's an easier start if you've never networked before, particularly for introverts. Okay, you enter extroverts, you'll talk to anyone at any time about anything. But introverts are a little more focused on the internal world and don't necessarily project their energy out to the world of people and things. So introverts, it's often a good idea to start with people you know. Classmates, okay, high school and college. Faculty, a lot of people miss the opportunity to turn back to their faculty. Faculty, employers sometimes will bypass the career services office and go straight to the faculty and say, you know, I want you to post this, or I want you to send me resumes of 10 alums that you know might be looking. Also, college administrators that you may have come into contact with in your experience. Previous employers can be helpful. Also, the professionals in your life, like your doctors, your family's attorney or accountant, your dentist. all of these people I think are overlooked when people think about networking. And also, of course, high school and college alumni. Most colleges these days have alumni networks that you can use. Then there's the LinkedIn network. Also, colleges and universities have alumni clubs in various parts of the United States and also internationally. You can search your college's website for that, and these are just groups of people who graduated from the same institution who happen to be located, in Washington, D.C. or in San Francisco or in Paris. And you can reach out to those people. And every college has an alumni directory um, that is designed to keep track of who came in one door and out the other. And typically, alumni can access those directories and use those to identify people that they'd like to network with as well. And then, of course, there's your social media. There's LinkedIn and Facebook, and I don't know much about Instagram, but I hear that, that can be used as well. And also, uh, random contacts. I've been in college career development for 48 years now, and I have lots of stories about random contacts that led people to jobs. I myself, when I came out of graduate school, was standing in line at the grocery store complaining to the woman in front of me about how long this was taking. And we started to chat. And she asked me who I was. And I said, I'm just coming out of my graduate program looking for a job. She goes, oh, what? I said, well, in student personnel, either counseling or career development. She goes, my daughter is working at Kane College in New Jersey and she's about to hand in her registration. So, she gave me her contact information, which was a telephone number at that point. I called her. She told me about the job. I ended up applying. I didn't even get an interview, but a random contact gave me a job opening that in a different world, I might be working in at this point. Also, I have tales of people who have been on an airplane talking to the woman across the aisle, and turns out that, that person is in a hiring capacity at an organization that they'd like to work for. One of my favorite Marist examples is a young woman who went on the train to New York City every day, and the same woman sat next to her every day. And finally, the woman asks her, what are you doing on your laptop every morning? And she starts to explain her capping project in finance. And sure enough, the woman who's sitting next to her is a VP at Citigroup in New York City. And one thing leads to another. And right after graduation, she went to work for Citigroup. So these things can happen. You have to be reminded of the theory of 6 degrees of separation. Do you all know about that? Have you heard about it? Yeah. Okay. That you're connected with what you want in the world by only 6 people. So my view is anybody could be the first person in that chain, so you want to spread your message as far and wide as you possibly can. Also, don't eliminate people because of their geographic location. I used to do something in my class where I would have every student go around, they would say what they wanted to do after college, and then people in the class would say, "Oh, my father, my cousin, a friend of mine, so and so, he's in California, but I can give you his email address." It doesn't matter where they are geographically, because the world is a much smaller place than it used to be, and folks are connected. I can give you a whole bunch of if you want to go into career counseling someday, I can connect you with a whole bunch of people in New York, in the mid-Atlantic region, and also some folks in the Middle West and in the middle, and then in California. So I find that people eliminate, I don't want to network with him because, he's in Louisiana. How can he help me? Well, don't eliminate them. Okay, next screen, Robert. Things to consider about networking. The first contact, you want to, you want to write a brief email, maybe about 5 or 6 lines, introducing who you are, how you found that particular person, and that you are looking for advice and guidance. When you say, I'm looking for a job, it can frighten person you want to network because they may not know about a job and they don't want to disappoint you. So they may opt not to talk to you instead. So always ask for advice and guidance and keep the job topic as subtext initially. Okay. And let them know that you feel that their experience, hearing about their experience, how they got to where they were, would be very helpful to you. And offer them the option of meeting in person, if that's possible, a telephone exchange, a Zoom or FaceTime exchange, or an email exchange. Some people would rather, respond to your 4 or 5 questions via email than actually have, a phone or in person or Zoom interaction. Okay. Um, okay. We are gonna go to some questions. Um, it would be very helpful for you to have a business card. I saw this great business card like 25, 30 years ago, a business card that folds over, and opens up, and it had the person's information and then a little mini version of their resume on the inside. If you are at a social function or if you are at a business function or an actual networking event, most of these days we don't carry around our resumes, but a business card can be extremely important. And also collect business cards of folks that talk to at those kinds of events. After a networking interaction, you always, always, always send a thank you note. An email thank you note is okay, but if you want to be a real standout, you send them a handwritten thank you note. You buy some nice note cards and do it handwritten. It really jumps out at them. You can also ask people, and I think you should, if you can contact them after this initial conversation, if another question comes up for you. I think it's always best to ask if that's okay. Most people will say yes. Okay. Also, what I recommend for every networker is that you set yourself up a spreadsheet, simple spreadsheet, so that you can record the names of the people that you spoke to, their titles, who they work for, their business address, their phone number, their email address, and a brief summary of the conversation that you had and any notes, anything that struck you, if you want to get back to them about a certain topic, or if, you visited them at the workplace and it seemed extremely stressful, any notes, because um, this is building that network of contacts for your future. And you will have a record of who you spoke to in case you want to get back to them. And let's say you've been networking for 6 or 7 months, you finally land a job. You want to send an email to all of these people and say, thank you very much for being part of the process. I've accepted this job. They love that. They love hearing about your successes. And you can also continue to keep in touch with them periodically. I have about 15 people from the 5 institutions I've worked for who are still in touch with me. They tell me when they're getting married, they tell me when they're having kids. It's just a wonderful thing. It's very nice to watch someone that you've helped progress in the world and be successful. And one of them very recently came back to me because she was reorganized out of her job. And we had a conversation. She invited me out for coffee. We talked about her job search and etc. So even the people that you haven't talked to in quite a long time, if you keep in touch with them, will remember you and be open to helping you if you need help again. Okay. Um, okay. A lot of people will ask me, these people really want to help me, or am I just bothering them or taking up their time? In my 48 years, I've talked with a lot of people, and I often ask them, does it bother you when, people contact you for networking purposes and need your help? And I would say 98% of them say, oh, no, absolutely not. I love to talk about what I do. I love the idea of helping someone come into my profession. So try not to worry about that, because people do want to be helpful. If you all want to be career counselors, I'll be happy to talk to you, and I connect you with, oh, at least 25 other people in the industry to talk to. Anyway, can we go to the next screen, Robert, so we can look at some questions to ask? Again, we don't want to pounce on them with the, do you know of any job openings? But we want to ask them some more indirect questions that will yield good information for you, okay? And also may elicit information about a possible job opening. So, how and where are job openings publicized in this field? Everybody knows about Indeed and Glassdoor and ZipRecruiter and all of those, but there are also a lot of professional niche job sites that don't get a whole lot of press, that these individuals may know about. And also a good way to identify them for yourself is to do a Google search, best job websites in, and put in your field. Indeed's going to come up all the time, all the time. But there are these nice niche sites that you could increase the number of openings you know about by using them. How do most people get hired into this organization? Are some methods more effective than others? Opportunities for part-time or freelance? Does your organization require application forms or exams? How competitive is the market? What's the turnover rate? Okay. Do you anticipate any vacancies in the near future? Do you know of any other organizations in the field that you could apply for? And have you heard of any vacancies? There's the one. You're finally getting around to actually opening up the topic of job openings. Can you go to the next screen for me,
Yeah.
Robert? That's a good idea when you're connecting with someone to ask for some feedback on your resume, to ask if you can leave a resume with them. Some people will initiate, they will say, yeah, leave me a resume or send it to me, and I'll walk it down the hall and give it to the HR person, or I'll make sure my manager sees it. You hope that, the subtext of finding a job will arise, during the conversation. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it can be very powerful. Sometimes it doesn't, but you put this person on your spreadsheet, and 3 months from now, you might touch back with them, and it can be, oh, gee, yeah, they just listed an opening. I had someone do this with me when I started at Marist, which is now Marist University. She called and she did a informational interview with me because her boyfriend was going to move to Poughkeepsie to work at IBM, and she was up way God's country somewhere, way up at the top of New York State. So we did that. Sent me a nice thank you letter. She said, "Can I keep in touch?" Said, "Absolutely, sure." She was impressive. So about 6 months later, she calls, and the boyfriend did take the job in Poughkeepsie, and they were coming down. And had I heard of anything? I hadn't at the time, but I made sure to give her the information of all the career directors in all the Mid-Hudson area colleges. And then 2 weeks after that, somebody on my staff resigns. And who do I call? I call Pam Meads and say, "This is going to be in the Chronicle of Higher Education. It's going up next week. Look for it. I'd like you to apply." And who did we hire? That's the person we hired. So often these things don't happen right away, but you want to get yourself into that person's brain, and impress them and keep in touch with them so that if an opening occurs, you're the first person they think of. Okay. Also, the last question to ask, this is an old salesperson pitch, you know, never leave the house that you're trying to sell encyclopedias at without asking if, the person has a friend that they could refer you to. Do you have a friend or colleague that it would also benefit me to speak to? You always want to leave, if you possibly can, with another name to contact. Okay, we have a little under 10 minutes for questions. I have not been keeping my eye on the chat, so I don't know if anyone's in there. Does anyone have a question or, a comment for the good of the group?
Well, I just want to hop in and say thank you. That is really, really, really thorough and wonderful, and a good brush up for all of us to do stuff. I want to put a plug in for leading with the VISTA. like people, the AmeriCorps, there are over 200,000 AmeriCorps alumni. It is a fraternity of people of collegial spirits. And if push comes to shove, an AmeriCorps alum is interviewing you, they should pick, if all things being equal, they should pick an AmeriCorps member. And that has happened to me where I was a finalist and it came down to me between an internal candidate and myself. And my boss had been a VISTA supervisor and he just said, I know I'm supposed to hire the VISTA. So
Wow.
it works. So
Yeah.
lead with what you've committed to, and it's worth it.